toxic masculinity.
Biden rolls out new executive orders on gun control.
Yeah. It's pretty annoying. Look, I actually didn't really want to cover this story because I think everybody's probably covering it, but I thought it was something that was such a big story, you might say, that it did need to be covered. Let's see here. Well, all right, let's go ahead and play this audio here.
Today, I'm announcing several initial steps my administration is taking to curb this epidemic of gun violence. Much more need to be done, but the first, want to rein in the proliferation of so-called ghost guns. These are guns that are homemade, built from a kit, that include directions on how to finish the firearm. You can go buy the kit. They have no serial numbers, so when they show up at a crime scene, they can't be traced. And the buyers aren't required to pass a background check to buy the kit, to make the gun. Consequently, anyone from a criminal to a terrorist can buy this kit in as little as 30 minutes, put together a weapon. You know, I want to see these kits treated as firearms under the Gun Control Act, which is going to require that the seller and manufacturers make the key parts with serial numbers and run background checks on the buyers when they walk in to buy that package.
All right, so that was not really the same part of the speech that we're going to cover here, but that's pretty funny too. This idea that any kind of like kit that's sold to build a gun also has to have a serial number the same way as the gun does. It's kind of a weird proposition because it's sort of like any craft. Like, that would be a very difficult thing to regulate. And I'll tell you why. Well, there's a variety of reasons why, but imagine that somebody wants to make a gun from scratch. And the idea is that he's got to get a registration for it. And we have to have a law about that and that kind of thing. Like, I mean, it's a doable thing, I suppose. You could definitely, if you see somebody with a gun that's not registered, you could potentially, they could be in trouble for not having registered the gun. I don't know about having a kit registered. You'd maybe want them to register the final product, but I don't understand really registering the kit, how that works. I don't know. Because you could have people just making guns from scratch. Are those guns, you don't have to register them, or?
I don't know.
I don't get it. Anyway, it's kind of weird. A lot of people have criticized that as being a terrible idea. But let's go ahead and read this article and see what they have to say about this. Biden declares no amendment to Constitution is absolute as he rolls out gun measures. See, this is the thing that I really don't like, because he's saying that no constitutional amendment is absolute in the sense that you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. There's certain limitations on your freedom of speech in the same way there's certain limitations on weapons. We can't just buy like a nuclear bomb. We can't have a nuclear bomb. If an American citizen owns a nuclear bomb and the American government doesn't know about it and hasn't said that's good, that's okay, you can go ahead and have that nuclear bomb, which I don't think they would ever do, but let's say that they, that's a possibility, I guess. Like the Manhattan Project, right? These guys were dealing with nuclear weapons, developing the atomic bomb. Obviously, to some degree, they had it in their possession because they're working with the federal government. But anyway, you're not allowed to have a nuclear weapon. That's fine. I think most people would agree that that's okay. But I think what he's trying to say is there's no absolutes. You can't have any kind of weapon. But the thing is, that's not really something that's debated. So what is he saying here that's sort of different, or what is the message he's trying to convey? And what I think is he's trying to convey here, in the same way he's talking about language, is that the way Democrats see it, because there are no absolutes with these constitutional amendments, these constitutional amendments can really be interpreted in any way they want. So you can say nobody can have a nuclear bomb, but we can have every other kind of weapon. That would be like one extreme. Or the other extreme could be like, you're allowed to have mace. You're allowed to have pepper spray. We're going to classify pepper spray as a weapon. Mm-hmm. And you're not allowed to have any other weapons. If we find any other weapons, you're going to prison. Pepper spray, on the other hand, is okay. It was funny, actually. I was talking to somebody today about the Capitol, the Capitol protest, which they're calling an insurrection. And I told them, I'm like, Democrats lie because they're calling it an armed insurrection. Like, that's like, to me, that's an obvious example of something that's an obvious lie. And this person said, what did he say? He said, so you're saying that the guy with the zip ties didn't have a weapon? And I'm like, first of all, those weren't his zip ties. He found them. The police had these zip ties, and he found them and he was returning them to a police officer. Which has been noted, by the way, in a court of law. That's not something that's even being disputed anymore. And then he said that the spear that was being held by the shaman guy was supposedly a weapon. And I'm like, first of all, I don't even remember him having a spear, but if he did, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I mean, I guess you could call it a weapon. Would you call the paint that he had on his face war paint? Would you consider the animal skins?
Yes.
Like, the guy was obviously like a showman. He didn't try to attack anyone with his spear, if that's even what he had. So I certainly would not call that a weapon. That's like saying, would you consider this actor on a stage with a plastic sword armed? No, I would not call a guy on a stage with a plastic sword armed. Of course I wouldn't, because that's insane. And then the same way, this showman with, like, if he did have a spear, I don't even remember him having it. Did he have a spear? Is that like a real? I'm going to look that up. I know I'm wasting you guys' time, but I don't care. I want to see. What is he called? The Capitol Hill Shaman? Let's see here. Images. Oh, yeah. Yeah, he does have a spear. He does have a spear. It's the flag that he has. So he has a flag with a spear point. A spear point. Yeah. Okay, I can show you guys here. So this is the spear that we're talking about. And that does look kind of dangerous. So
Yeah, it is.
So I guess if you were going to say that it was an armed insurrection, this is the weapon that we're talking about, because there weren't any other weapons that I'm aware of that went into the Capitol, except pepper spray. So then the last thing the guys that I was talking to was like, well, these insurrectionists had pepper spray. Mm-hmm. And so they had pepper spray, they had zip ties, and they had the shaman spear. And this justifies the mainstream media calling it an armed insurrection. No, it absolutely doesn't. And I'll tell you why it doesn't. Because if it had been Black Lives Matter going in, and they had had a shaman with a spear, and they had had pepper spray, and they had had zip ties, no one would have called that an armed insurrection. None of the people that are calling this an armed insurrection would have called that an armed insurrection. And there's no amount of convincing that could have made them call it an armed insurrection, because that's ridiculous. Nobody considers these to be weapons. That spear was a show object. It had nothing to do with weaponry. The zip ties were found and left over by cops, and I don't know of anybody who calls pepper spray a weapon. I mean, I guess you could call it that, but even then, you wouldn't say anyone with pepper spray is armed.
Well, I guess I'm armed.
I know you're armed. You're armed all the time. But anyway, yeah. So, but let's say that they do call pepper spray a weapon. You could say every single weapon is banned in America except for pepper spray. That's the weapon that you're allowed to have. That could be an interpretation of the Second Amendment. You know, the way that Biden is talking about this. They want to be able to ban anything. But anyway, let's read here. So Washington. This is Washington, D.C., obviously. President Biden on Thursday announced a slew of new gun control measures after a recent pair of high-profile mass shootings, and insisted the Second Amendment doesn't grant an absolute right to own guns. Biden, I mean, it's a bizarre thing to say because it doesn't really change anything in the conversation. We obviously know that there are some weapons that are banned in America, that you have to have special licenses to have and stuff like that. We all know that.
Yeah.
So for him to sit there and be like, it's not absolute, to me, that's just an indication that he just wants to severely restrict the rights that we already have, the way that the system already exists. Biden presented the executive actions in the Rose Garden, joined by Attorney General Merrick Garland and Vice President Kamala Harris. All degenerates. I don't know much about Merrick Garland. I shouldn't say that about him. Let's see here. No amendment to the Constitution is absolute, Biden maintained, pointing to the famous Supreme Court ruling that you can't yell fire in a crowded theater as part of the First Amendment's free speech clause. You can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater and call it freedom of speech. From the very beginning, you couldn't own any weapon you wanted to own. From the very beginning that the Second Amendment existed, certain people weren't allowed to have weapons. So the idea is just bizarre to suggest that some of the things we're recommending are contrary to the Constitution, he said. No, it's not bizarre. It's not bizarre. That's not bizarre. Because there's always an argument about which weapons should be legal, without really, without much regulation at all. And that's conversation's been going on for years and years and years and years. And the more we limit our constitutional right to bear arms, the more the more conservatives think you're potentially infringing on the rights of Americans. And the more freedom that you give them to have weapons, the more you are in keeping with the Second Amendment in the view of most conservative Americans. Now, leftists tend to acknowledge, at least a lot of leftists I've spoken with, tend to acknowledge that they don't like the Second Amendment. They don't like that people have the right to have weapons, to bear arms. They don't like that. Some people will even go as far as to argue, well, no, it only says you have the right to bear arms if you're part of a militia, which is not true. That's not how the Second Amendment has ever been interpreted. But a lot of people want to interpret it that way because they don't want individuals to be able to have guns. Mm-hmm. It's just not the way the Constitution was written. Let's read here. In fact, I tweeted about this today. What did I write? Oh. We got audio? We're still good?
Looks like, yeah.
Okay, just making sure. I'm going to check my Twitter, ladies and gentlemen. I wish I had hold music that I could play, because Valeria does not fill the silence.
Because I don't know what to
with
say.
Dialogue.
I don't know.
Okay, this is from Samuel Adams. He said, the Constitution shall never be construed to prevent the people of the United States who have peaceable citizens from keeping their own arms. That's a quote from Samuel Adams that I tweeted today. And that's it. That's what the Founding Fathers wanted. They wanted people to be able to have their own arms to protect themselves in their homes and as a deterrent against government tyranny, right? It's those two things, for us to protect ourselves against villains, protect ourselves from government tyranny. Obviously, a lot of people use them as tools for hunting as well. But those are the primary reasons we have the Second Amendment. Protect ourselves in our homes and to guard against government tyranny. Tyranny or tyranny? I don't know. Tyranny, probably. Me not know how to speak so good. But this is the other thing. He says you can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater and call it freedom of speech. That, to me, is a very telling thing for him to express, like a second idea that he wants to express, because they're trying to take away our First Amendment rights as well. They're trying to limit as much of our First Amendment as they can. They're trying to limit as much of our Second Amendment as they can. And I don't even think they care that much about the rest of them. Obviously, they want to limit all of our freedoms, but those two, I think, are the ones they're really going after because, it helps the left. The left... All right, so he says, gun violence in this country is an epidemic. Let me say it again. Gun violence in this country is an epidemic, and it's an international embarrassment. The two most widely anticipated measure instructs the Justice Department to issue a proposed regulation within 30 days to undermine the at-home manufacture of so-called ghost guns, which can be made with equipment that drills and folds metal parts. Activists who oppose gun control have promoted the technology. Well, how about this? How about just go through Congress? Why don't you just propose legislation like every other president does? Why don't you just have legislation go through Congress like normal and then sign off on that legislation? Why does it have to be executive orders all the time? It's almost like Joe Biden is producing these executive orders on purpose. I don't really know why he would do that. It's just like to show off that like we don't care about the rules don't apply to us anymore. Like we're not America like you knew. We're a new version of America,
It's
right?
faster.
We've built back better. Yeah, we no longer have a government with checks and balances. We just have, the Biden administration, and that's it. There is no more Congress. There is no more Supreme Court. It's just the executive branch, and that's it. And Biden doesn't even run it. It's whatever puppeteers are. Somebody sent me a joke today. Actually, it was somebody who watches the show. What did they write? Oh, I can't find it now. Son of a.
Oh, such a shame.
I don't remember.
You need to take a screenshot.
Huh?
Take a screenshot next time.
I think they posted a. Who was it? What did they must have sent it on some other kind of a messaging service, or I can't find it now. But they wrote something like they sent me a picture of a marionette puppet, and then a picture of Joe Biden, and they say, "What is the difference between this marionette puppet and Joe Biden?" And it was like, we know who's pulling the strings of this marionette puppet. and they looked very similar, right? I wish I would have had that picture, but anyway. Oh, you know what? I do have it. It doesn't matter. I know where it is. I just don't know the guy. I just don't know who this guy is that wrote this to me, but it's Biden and Walter the Dummy. Walter the Dummy, I think, is kind of a known dummy. He looks a lot like Joe Biden. I don't know if you guys can see that, but that's the picture he sent me. And then he said, "What's the difference between Biden and Walter the Dummy? We know who's handling Walter." Oh, that was pretty funny. Kind of a brilliant joke. But yeah, whoever his handlers are, it's almost like they want people to know we don't have to go through the legislative branch. We just make up our own rules and that's it. And we just sign executive orders and that's it. It's really, really weird. I don't understand why they're doing it this way. I know it's quicker, but aren't people going to realize that that this is like corrupt and that they shouldn't be doing this? I mean, almost everything Joe Biden's doing is going to be knocked down by the Supreme Court. I mean, unless they pack the court, which is possible. All right. Another action orders the Justice Department to issue a regulation within 60 days that would make clear when a device marketed as a stabilizing brace effectively turns a pistol into a short-barreled rifle, subject to the requirements of the National Firearms Act. Good Lord. They're just being more and more annoying, aren't they? How dare you stabilize that pistol? Now it's a rifle. It's a totally different classification. The White House said in a fact sheet. I mean, the problem is they're just making more and more and more and more and more red tape and regulations, so it's just more and more difficult to own a gun, to do anything with a gun. Like, they're just being like Democrats, really. Anyway, the point is, a lot of these rights, a lot of these restrictions and regulations that they're doing, they will not curtail the gun crime. They will not curtail the number of tragedies that are occurring in America. Nothing that they're doing is going to be remotely effective. And part of the reason is because they won't face the fact that most of the gun crime that occurs in America is from young black men killing other young black men, right? That's really the primary problem. If they really want to get rid of murders in America by gun, they need to tackle that issue. And they don't want to talk about that because that would make them. They're like, oh no, people are going to think we're racist. We can't talk. We can't admit that black people are doing committing most of the murders in America. That'd sound racist. So we can't do that. So they go after the guns instead. I mean, I think this is at least part why Democrats do this, is so that they don't have to actually face the realities of the culture problem that we have. But anyway, Joe Biden's trying to crack down on the gun thing more and more and more, and he's just going to piss people off. And I don't know, guys. I don't know how we're going to get Joe Biden out of office here. I hope we can do it. 2022, let's try to get as many of the Republicans in as we can, and then we can really shut down the Biden administration. But he won't be there for long, at least. Fortunately, he'll soon be gone. Huh?
A year?
Something like that. But the sad part of that is that we're going to get somebody Probably worse. Yeah. All right, darling,
Yes.
it's all you.
Biden tax hikes will cost 1 million jobs.
1 million jobs. Yeah, so there's a new
Is it about corporate tax?
there's a new study out, and it's indicated that we're going to lose 1 million jobs from his tax hikes. If President Joe Biden... Toxic Masculinity. Weekdays, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific.